All right, I promised I would do this video. A lot of people have been commenting to get this video to happen, so thanks so much for everybody who subscribed and checking out what I'm doing. This is the Live Stream Musician. My name is Timaholic. This is brought to you by A Lot of Hype. Let's get into the video. So you probably clicked on this video because you want to be able to live stream yourself using some kind of a MIDI VST, like a keyboard plugin or a piano plugin or a drum plugin, or you want to use a plugin like a guitar amplifier or a bass amplifier or something like that. So you have some software that you want to use on stream to make your instruments sound better or sound at all in the case of a MIDI keyboard, right? This doesn't have any sound whatsoever. It's just a keyboard and then MIDI goes out, and hopefully there's software on the other side that takes the MIDI data that comes from this keyboard and turns it into sound. So we're going to go over how you do that. So check it out. All right, if you haven't already downloaded the Live Streaming Musician Blueprint, there's a link to download the Live Streaming Musician Blueprint in the description of this video. It has tips and tricks and all sorts of potential problems that you may face as a streaming musician on the internet. So feel free to download that link in the description of this video. Let's get into the video. All right, so we're going to do this essentially in two parts. First part is going to be how to use a MIDI instrument like a keyboard, and then the second part is going to be how to use something like a guitar amplifier MIDI VST, or not MIDI, just a VST for a guitar amplifier. So before you do either of these, you do have to route your audio in a specific way. So if you haven't already, it depends on if you're using a Mac or a PC. If you're using a Mac, then I recommend what I call the two interface setup. So I have two interfaces. One is a Focusrite Claret 4 Pre. One is an XR18 Behringer mixer. And I have the outputs of my Focusrite plugged into the inputs of my XR18. And inside of OBS, I have the XR18 selected as the mixer that I use for my audio input capture device. So you have an audio input capture device right here, and you can see the properties. It's essentially just that XR18, right? So yeah, before you do any of this, you're going to need to route your audio properly. So take the external plugs from one of your interfaces, plug them into the input plug connectors of the interface that you're going to be using to have OBS listen to. So you have one interface you use for your actual MIDI devices to be plugged into, your guitars, your microphone, all that stuff is going to be plugged into your main interface. And what I call the janky interface, which is a different interface. Usually, I recommend people just go buy these for like $100, like a PreSonus M Audio box, or it doesn't even matter, just something with two inputs. And then that interface is pretty much just the OBS listening device. So you use your nice interface or your better interface for Ableton Live or Pro Tools or whatever, and then obviously the janky interface, the outputs from your good one go into that less expensive interface, and then that is an audio input capture device inside of OBS, and you're ready to rock and roll. All right, cool. So now that you have your audio routed in a way that OBS can actually hear your computer audio, let's go over what you need to do. So I have a couple different plugins. One of them is a organ plugin called a Blue 3. And so the Blue 3 organ plugin is pretty awesome. It's got a bunch of amazing sounds, but in order for me to be able to use this on stream, I obviously first had to download it and pay for it and all that good stuff. And then I need to go into the settings. So you go into the settings of whatever your MIDI instrument is. Now I'm running this as a standalone program. A lot of MIDI instruments you can run as a standalone program. Most MIDI instruments you don't actually need to open Ableton, run a new track inside of Ableton and all this stuff. Now, if you want to do that, that's fine. Just know that it's going to take up a lot more computing power. And if you're not using an extremely powerful computer, it may cause a lot of problems on the video encoding side inside OBS. So your video might look really, really poor quality. You might be dropping frames. Everything might be stuttering. You might start getting pops and clicks because your audio drivers are overloaded. So just be aware that if you are going to be running one of your audio plugins like this Blue 3 organ or EZKeys or anything like that inside of a DAW, that is going to cause potentially other problems since the DAW itself is also going to be taking up computing power. So I'm going to go in both ways. We'll do both ways, but the first one I'm going to show you is just running a standalone MIDI VST type situation like this Blue 3 organ, and we'll do EZKeys too. Okay, cool. So there is in here an I/O button down here. So if I click I/O, I can bring up audio MIDI settings. So if I bring in the audio MIDI settings, now I can choose which driver and everything I want to do, right? So the output, I do want the output, the audio that comes from this particular plugin. I do want this audio to go to my Claret 4 pre. That way, whenever my audio comes out of this plugin, it goes out the Claret, out of those cables that I just showed you, into the XR18, and then from there, that can be heard by OBS, right? So I'm going to go ahead and say, yes, I want to go to the outputs. Let's do outputs 1 and 2 and outputs 3 and 4. And actually, I think I need to do 3 and 4 because my outputs are 3 and 4. So let's just double check real quick. Well, one, I also have to activate the keyboard itself. So that's not it. Let's check 1 and 2. There it is. Okay, cool. So I have those cables plugged in technically to 3 and 4, but inside my Focusrite software, which I'll show you really quickly, I can route whatever I want. So you can see here, line outputs 3 and 4 actually go to playback of 1 and 2. So whatever my outputs 1 and 2 are, my line outputs on the back are also going to be 1 and 2. I can separate these if I like. That's just not how I have it set up right now. So depending on how you have your routing of potentially the drivers, right, for your audio interface, you may want to double check and make sure that the sound actually does make it all the way to your second interface and OBS can hear it before you give yourself a headache trying to make this work. Okay, cool. So we've gone over that. So now we're going to go to audio MIDI settings, output 1 and 2, perfect, 64 samples. Now this is where it's going to get tricky. The lower the sample rate, if you go down to 16, it is going to take way more computing power. The higher the sample rate, it will take less computing power. But the problem is the higher the sample rate, the more latency you're going to get. So watch, let's just do like some crazy high sample rate, right? So you can probably hear that when I hit the key. Hopefully you can hear that in the microphone. It's digant, right? So there's delay. Now if I change the sample rate to, I use 64. I have a really fast computer. You might have to use 96 or 256 or something, but now. Right, so you can actually hear the second I hit the keyboard, the sound from the organ comes out at the same time. So we got our output set, we got our sample rate, which is the same as all the other sample rates should be set in OBS. All of your sample rates should always be the same. Just pick one. I use 44.1. You can use whatever you want, but just pick a sample rate and make sure all your devices and everything are always using the same sample rate. Audio buffer size 64 samples. This is for me. I have a fast computer, but that's a low latency. And then make sure you activate the audio because the MIDI, because this device is plugged in USB. Now, if I plug this into the MIDI port on the back of my Claret 4 pre USB, I would want to check this too. I'm using the USB cable on the Axiom 61, so just be aware of which one of the active MIDI inputs you're going to need to select in order to make your keyboard work. Okay, long-winded, but now it works. All right, cool. So now we have audio coming from our keyboard. I can actually turn it up a little bit. Now, one thing you're going to need to be aware of is inside of these plugins, they may come out a little hot. So watch, if I turn this volume up, we're going to start getting peaking like crazy. Right? So you can hear that, like where it starts like kind of crackling. And you can see up here, it's turning red. That's bad. So let's turn this volume down. There we go. Cool. That's an acceptable volume. Now, a lot of people are going to want to play music while they are on stream, and they're going to want to play along with some music. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's pull up like a little track. Okay. So we're going to kind of play along with this, and now what you got to do is kind of mix the music and the sound. Now, what you're hearing through your headphones, if you're listening to the main interface, is what's going to leave the back of that interface and go into OBS. So if it sounds good to you, it's going to sound good to the stream. This is usually generally a pretty good way to do this, is make sure that whatever you're hearing is what they're hearing. There are some circumstances where that doesn't make sense. Like if you're playing a live drum set, you probably actually want more music in your headphones than they want because the drums in the room that you're playing in are going to be too loud. But generally speaking, you're going to want to hear what the audience is hearing. So let's check this out. Okay, cool. Let's go back over here. All right. So now you understand, if we just get a MIDI plugin by itself, we make sure that our inputs and outputs are set up correctly, right? Inside the software, they're going to have IOs somewhere, whether it's in settings or somewhere. You just have to find a panel that looks like this, where the audio goes, what the sample rate is, what the buffer size is, and what the MIDI inputs are. Then you make sure that your volume is not peaking, right? So make sure that the volume on the software itself is not actually peaking. And then you play some music and you try to mix those two together in your headphones so it sounds good. And there you go. You're pretty much done. All the audio is going to leave the Focusrite in time and enter the other interface in time and be received by OBS, and there shouldn't be too much of a delay. Now, one thing you are going to need to do inside of OBS is this situation right here. So you're going to need to right-click or click on this gear icon right here, and then you're going to click Advanced Audio Properties. Now, inside Advanced Audio Properties, you are going to want to set a sync offset right here to 125 milliseconds. That's it. If this is set to 125 milliseconds, then your audio will be slightly slower than your video. Video takes a little bit longer to process by your computer than audio does. So if you set this to 0, your audio process is faster. You will hear something before it happens. You know, someone will be playing the keyboards and then they'll hit a note and they'll hear the note before your finger hits it, just slightly, but it kind of throws people off. So just make sure that you have your sync offset. I use 125 milliseconds. You can use whatever you want, but start with 125 and see if your computer makes that look nice. You can always just do a quick recording and make sure that works. If that works, then sweet, you're ready to rock and roll. All right, cool. Let's drag this back over here. Now we will do the adding this plugin to an Ableton session. So I have an Ableton session open right now because I'm recording what's going on. So let's add a new MIDI track to this Ableton session. New MIDI track. There we go. Now let's just do something like EZKeys. Fantastic. We'll add EZKeys here, and the EZKeys plugin will pop up right here. Looks great. Now I should be able to, once I arm the track over here, you should just be able to hear my keyboard. Okay, cool. All right, so now you can hear the keyboard, which is fantastic. So, same thing, we could play along to some music. You can obviously tell that I am a virtuoso piano player. All right, so that's essentially how it works. You're gonna make sound some way somehow, whether it's using the VST inside of an DAW like Ableton or something like that, or whether you are just going to be using the plugin by itself and then making sure that the audio input or the MIDI inputs are routed properly into that application, and the audio output is routed out of your main interface so it can go into your second interface and then into OBS. We'll do EZKeys real quick just in case one of you homies out there uses EZKeys. This one actually took me a little bit of time to find because you're like, where's that input output? Like, where is it? Well, I'll show you where it is because it's not where you think it is. So you have to go to here, settings, and then audio MIDI setup. And so from here, that same thing comes up. Okay, which device type are we going to use? It's core audio. Fantastic. Output device is going to be this Claret 4 Pre. And as you can see, right now it says output latency 7.9 milliseconds, buffer latency 5.8 milliseconds, and then there's my sample rate. If I lower this 256 to 64, these numbers are going to go down. I will get less latency. So now it's 7.9 milliseconds of output latency and pretty much no buffer latency, right? So it depends on how fast your computer is. If you lower this and you're starting to get pops and clicks and all sorts of bad sounds, you're going to need to raise this buffer size up. So now let's apply these changes. Out channel, output 1 goes to 2, output, right goes to output 2. Fantastic. MIDI device. Now I can select the axiom, right? Seems like it makes sense to me. Let's go ahead and apply that. Now let's go in Ableton and delete this track just so that I am not hearing it coming from that. And let's test it. Cool. So you can see it's very easy. You just need to make sure that your audio MIDI setup is there and that your output routing essentially includes 2 interfaces. Trying to get around the 2 interface setup and using a program called Loopback for Mac is fine. I've just had problems with that program. I'm not hating on it. You do whatever you want. If it works for you, please use it. I'm not paid to say I don't like it. I'm not paid to say I like it. I just find that using hardware eliminates problems. When you start using software, it puts more strain on your computer when you could just literally plug cables into 2 separate boxes, and then all of that audio routing is happening outside of your computer environment, so there's no additional computing power required to route or capture audio. So something to take into account. That's what I do. You feel free to do whatever you want. It does exist. You can do it. All right, now let's go to the guitar portion of this video. All right, so now if you're going to be doing this with a guitar, it's going to be a really similar setup to what we just did with the keyboards, and I'll show you what's going on. So I use some plugins by Neural DSP, and probably my favorite guitar amp that they make that I own is the Pliny amplifier. So as you can see here, it's a pretty cool amp situation that I got going. So let's pick up my guitar and we'll get into it real quick. So same kind of situation. This guitar may or may not be tuned, and that's okay. So my audio is routed in the same fashion that it was with the other one, which is the audio inputs go into, so my guitar is plugged into my main interface, which is the Focusrite. My audio outputs of the Focusrite go into the inputs of the XR18. From the inputs of the XR18, the USB cable goes into this computer, and it is taken into the computer as an audio input capture device, which is right here. That's all you got to do is click that button, add the second interface into OBS, only the second interface. You don't need to add the first one. You can see here, I just have the XR18. That's the only interface on this computer that I am allowing OBS to capture audio from. All right, cool. So now that I have that, we can do a couple things. Now, a lot of these guitar amplifier plugins are going to have oversampling. Here's just one. We're going to go through these in no particular order, but high oversampling is going to take up more computing power. So generally, I just do normal. It's going to let you have a little bit less strain on your computer. Now, there's usually going to be a settings button on these somewhere. You're going to need to find that. And it's just like the other ones. You're going to have audio output device is going to be your nice interface because you want to output the audio from your nice interface to the interface that you're using to capture audio for OBS. Audio input device is going to be your nice interface because your guitar is going to be plugged into your nice interface. Output channels should be the output channels associated with your stream. And so in my case, it's 1 and 2. Audio input channels, I can select whichever ones I want, but my guitar is just plugged into channel 2. And if I selected input 1, my microphone, which is currently in input 1, would be coming through this guitar amplifier, which I do not want. So audio input channels, I'm just going to select input 2. Sample rate is 44.1, which is what I use for everything, and the audio buffer size. Again, the lower the buffer size, the more computing power it takes, but the lower the latency. So if I move this thing all the way up to 2480 samples, and I'll show you, there's latency in my guitar. Right, and I don't want that. So my computer's pretty fast. I will do 64 samples. Cool. So I don't need any MIDI input devices because I'm not using anything crazy like a cool MIDI foot controller, which you totally can use with a lot of these guitar amp modeling plugins. So I'm going to click exit on this, and then I could change my settings. I can make sure my output's not clipping, Now my guitar is clipping on my audio interface, so I'm going to turn that down just slightly. All right, cool. So same thing. We can just pull up a song and play along to that song. Let's do that same song that we were doing a second ago, and let's just play along to it really quickly. All right, let's go ahead and play along to that song again and see if we can't get a decent little mix here. cool. So it works. Now, if I wanted my guitar to be louder, I could crank up the output button here as long as it's not clipping like I was talking about in the MIDI keyboard section. And if I wanted the music to be louder, I could crank up the music. One good idea generally is to lower both volumes a little bit. So I would lower this output volume maybe like 3 or 4 dB, and then I would lower the music volume a little bit, right? Then I can kind of find a good medium here. So yeah, just kind of play with that. You're going to need to play with your levels, but again, it should work out pretty well. Hopefully this video is interesting. If it was, please leave a like, please subscribe, please share. I really want to start making some videos for you guys. And so I know a lot of you guys watch the channel. A lot of you guys have been supporting and saying what's up, coming by the stream. I stream generally on Thursdays. So if you want to come hang out, I have a pretty cool streaming setup with a friend of mine. We're doing a lot of music production stuff. And yeah, I'd love to see you guys over there. If you want to come check out the stream, you can check out this real quick before we go. I'll show you a little behind the scenes. But right now I have kind of a different setup. So my general setup is I got Ableton Live running, and then we have a couple different cameras. So this is when we're doing vocals because the vocal mic is usually right here. Got a camera for that. This is the big, nice camera. Then this is a drum camera, which is currently obfuscated. Hold on. All right, so this is a drum camera, so you can see me playing drums. Then we got the drum only camera, which is pretty cool. Then we got the keys, obviously. You saw a little bit of that earlier. So yeah, I got a cool setup. Come hang out in the stream. Like I said, Thursdays generally. Sometimes I'll stream during the week. But Timaholic, all the links for following me on the internet are down below. And also, I just started a Discord for the live streaming musicians. So if you have questions, comments, you want to hang out with people that are trying to figure this out on their own, we got a whole little troubleshooting room where everybody can try to solve each other's problems. I'm in there all the time. Come by and say what's up. My name is Timaholic. I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.